everyone. I'm Mary Jean Packer, and I know almost all of you from something. So I used to own Finger Lakes Fibers in Watkins Glen, and I used to live here in Trumansburg on Grove Road. And my daughter Sarah Grove may have graduated or something with the younger ones of you, and she lives in the Boulder area now. And after she and her twin brother were grown, and he, who knew DeWitt Grove, because he was big into Trumansburg sports, he's down in Spencer Van Etten now. He's their shop teacher. And who would have thought that? You know, anyhow, we digress. So I had a lifelong interest in knitting and how yarn was made. Well, my oldest son, who none of you did get to know as he's so old and stayed in Vermont, when we moved here, he and I went and visited Green Mountain Spinnery the same year it opened. So now you know I have a 38-year-old son. Anyhow, right then the seed was kind of planted, and off and on I just had an interest. I knit through thick and thin. We moved here in '05. Sarah, my Sarah, who knows you all, wanted to take spinning lessons. We met Kathy, and my Sarah learned to spin one spindle at a time, and I said, well, there's got to be a way with 60 or 80 spindles we could do this. And one thing led to another, and we opened a mill in Greenwich, New York, which is right on the Vermont border between Manchester, Vermont, and Saratoga, New York. And unfortunately, this year we opened in '09, and in 2010, the building we were renting burned to the ground around us. And we've lost everything except the customer's wool, which we had in a storage container, fortunately for the customers, not so for me, because as you'll recall, '09 and 2010 were times when the economy wasn't doing so well, so I lost my life savings in one night. And so the insurance only covered what I paid for the equipment, and so the county, which had lent me most of the money, $200,000, said, you know, you're welcome to keep that insurance check and buy new equipment, but you're going to start making payments. So I started making payments on equipment I didn't have in a building I didn't have, and that went on for about 6 months until Cindy Spence, who used to own the yarn store in Saratoga, did you know her?
Yeah.
We carried some of the same stuff, all of us. Anyhow, Cindy's brother is a real estate tycoon and had this empty 6,000 square foot warehouse and said, here, you can move in to my brother's warehouse. And so I did, and we bought the equipment, and on Christmas Eve, it was a Christmas miracle, on 2010, we made yarn again. And in 2015, we were Washington County Small Business of the Year and made almost $500 profit. That was our first year with a profit, and the last 2 years, we just broke into the 4 digits on the profit. Just saying, that on sales of about $750,000. So we're still a little slow on getting my life savings back, but as I said to Kathy, I'm still young and intend to sell my other businesses and just focus on the mill starting in 2019. So I'm optimistic that with your help, I will get that life savings back before it's said and done. So that said, I'm delighted to come in. I only told everybody so far boring stories about my kids and how I came to have a mill. So you haven't even seen the second slide.
They're still down the street, and we apologize.
No, it's fine.
We got
all
hung
good.
up.
But we will work on a plan for the next arrival. Will maybe come through this way and meet up over here. Okay. So, I thought we would cover quite a lot of material, and I'm not sure how long you want to talk and how long you want to interact. So, if it starts feeling like I'm talking and you're wanting to say something, say something. And either say stop talking or say I have a specific question. But in a perfect world, I would like to help you think through all 3 of these topics. And if we run out of time, we do. But I feel like it's my understanding a lot of the LocalFiber New York members or cooperators or whatever partners in the initiative are called are looking at commercialization. Not necessarily large scale, but nonetheless how could I make some money off of what I'm doing? You may love your animals like pets, but there's no need to also have to pay for them like they're pets when they could indeed pay for themselves. So that is what I hope will be one of the things we talk about. And the other is, for those of you who have concluded you'd like to try to make money either as a maker or as a farmer, well, what are some of the opportunities that I'm aware of and would want to just share with you in case you aren't on this vein of commercialization. And then finally talking, and I think this will interest people who aren't interested in commercialization, talking a little about what yarn can we make with what fiber, and what are the kinds of products you can make with what kinds of yarn. And as you can see, I've loaded this table down with samples, some of which you'd be welcome to buy at the end of the event, and some of which you can't ever buy, and I'll just tell you about. But so that's the goal, to cover three things, and I'll go at a pace that looks like you're enjoying. And if any of that's boring, I'll know because you'll start nodding. But a lot of people ask me, well, what are the opportunities? What can I be doing with the fleece I have or the business I have? And I say a lot depends on what you've got. What is your breed of sheep? Or what kind of animals? What kind of care are they given? Because a lot depends on how involved you want to get. And we'll cover that more and more, but it's, who were we talking to? Karen, I guess at dinner we were talking about Mark Harth and Bear Farm and Burdette, and now there's a scale where he's definitely got a lot of animals and could make a lot of money, but he's made a decision that he wants to be involved in the meat industry, that there's money to be made in lamb, and that's just fine. But so there is a fleece market. I buy what I can of his, but it's a decision he's made to not say, I'm just going to go into the fleece market, and that's fine because he knows how much work it is. If I was good at those graphs, the directly proportionate graphs, well, the amount of work you put in is directly proportionate to the amount of money that you can make off your products. And there's something for everyone. And then unfortunately, not every breed has a lot of demand. And those of you who have explored selling a fleece at Rhinebeck or on Etsy or wherever may have discovered that some breeds are selling for a whole lot more than others. And there's a lot of other factors that I've identified with the farmers that I work for here in New York State, and it doesn't seem to be that much about breed. It seems to me to be about story. The people who are interested in local fiber, people who are buying local wool, locally spun, locally whatever, I mean, soft is important, but it doesn't seem to be as critical as the story. And feeling a connection to the farmer or to the animals or to a place on the land. When I owned Finger Lakes Fibers in Watkins, I carried almost the whole line of Cheryl Schaefer's yarn. Remember, we all did, and it was the only local yarn in town. And I could sell 3 times the amount of the color called Finger Lakes than I could some of her best-selling colors that sold all over the country really well because I had her color that was called something local. So has to do as much with market as it does with your breed or what you make with it. So again, keep that in mind. And then I really didn't know quite who you all were and what to expect. If you all wanted to dig into what are the kinds of breeds of fiber sheep and how are those breeds divided, I'm happy to go deep into that topic or not so deep. I will tell you, regardless of how much you know or don't know or wish you didn't know. Fleece and Fiber Source Book. There's 2 versions. There's the coffee table version, the hardcover, very nice coffee table book, and then there's also for lack of a better term, the field guide to fleece and fiber. It sells for about 1/3 of the cost of the coffee table one. It's only this big and it fits in your purse. But it is an interesting publication, both by the same authors and both published by Story Publishing. So you can learn a ton more about that. So is that a new concept? Did you all know there's like these 3 major breeds of sheep? Fine wools and medium wools and long wools, sometimes called coarse wools, which is really maligns those poor long wool breeds to be called coarse wool. But technically in the ASI breeding, that's what they call them. So you all knew all that, right, about 3 kinds. So then the next slide is probably something that you all could have prepared yourself without my input, which is just explaining some of the names of the breeds in case you knew there was fine wool, but you weren't sure that a merino was a fine wool. I guess that's not a very good example. Well, or a Lincoln was a long wool or a coarse wool. So this is a great resource. It's from a book whose name is in the top right-hand corner online. It's called Wool Grades and the Sheep That Grow the Wool. And it's free by the American Sheep Industry Association, which is ASI, they call themselves. And you can order one of those to put in a shop or on your table at a festival, or you can just go online and look at one. There's a lot of good information from the sheep industry. And then some people ask me, well, what about the quality of the fiber here in the East compared to what you get from out West? And ladies, there's no gentlemen here, right? Ladies, it's no secret. The Western wool is a whole lot cleaner. They just don't get the rain. They have wide open, dry, I mean, it takes acres to feed one sheep. And around here, you can feed a sheep and, this size of space can barely keep up. And it's growing up around them. And the same with winters. We have this awful wet winter. Everyone's sheep and alpacas are all in the barn. And it's no fault of the farmers. And it's really no fault of the sheep, but sheep number 1 is eating like she's supposed to, trying to stay very clean. Sheep number 2 gets a big mouthful and turns her head to say something to sheep number 1, and while she's talking and eating, it's all falling out of her mouth into the middle of the back of sheep number 1. And this goes on day after day until that wool arrives. Not looking so good. And so if you're looking for top dollar for your wool or top quality finished products, you really need to think about doing all sorts of extreme things. Never letting your sheep in the barn, making them wear coats and changing them every few months, never feeding your sheep, only hand feeding each sheep in their own stanchion. I mean, it's going to take some dramatic things to have immaculate fleeces. And then the same thing with just your shearing plants. Ideally, no lamb ever climbs on the back of his or her mom while she's still got her hair on. Because the minute all that longish hair, from when you had your own kids and they're pulling on your hair, well, it's no different. And that's just weakening that fiber. And of course, they're going potty while on their mother's back, and that's getting in there. It's just a mess. So to shear before you lamb is what when people bring us a fleece, I always say, did you shear this recently? And we find out then, without even looking. And my opinion, if you're worrying about quality fleeces, either as the farmer or as the buyer, if you're dead serious about starting a small line of yarn or supplementing something you already have for fiber, and you want to go select more at a farm, go on shearing day. That's make or breaks. Everything I just now talked about can be undone. Even all that individual stalls with 4 separate coats and making sheep number 2 never eat over top of sheep number 1. All of that can be undone in 3 minutes. Shearing day can make or break your quality. So under this whole heading of let's be talking about designing yarn with the end in mind, we've touched on breed selection, and we'll go more into that in a bit depending on what you want. But we're really going to talk a lot about fiber preparation. And you all are thinking, oh no, I came to a class about yarn and knitting, And here we're looking at a picture of some guy's butt shearing the sheep. But here's a better picture of the same shearer. There's his front, and look at what that sheep is sitting on, a little piece of really clean, brand new plywood. That at least is going to reduce the contamination. If nothing else, so let's just say you don't own any sheep, but you've decided you're going to buy the clip of half a dozen. Go to Lowe's on your way to the shearing and pick up a sheet of plywood and say, here, I brought you a present. I know they're wanting a bottle of wine, but in the end, everyone's going to be happier with a sheet of plywood. And then the next piece, still under this heading of fiber preparation, is take a minute to skirt. Now there's a friend of mine, Carol Foster, Foster Sheep Farm. If any of you follow her, she has Romneys, Wensleydales, and that might be it, other longish wool. And there she is personally looking at every fleece as it comes off. And she's not afraid to tell the shearer, wait a minute, I'm still looking at this last fleece. And that's what it takes. Make sure you do a very good job before you pack it, and think about what you're packing it in. I'm just fine with that clear plastic bag. Keeps the moths out. Make sure it's dry before you put it in there. Don't leave it in the sun or where it'll get condensation. But I'm just fine with that. See these giant ones in the back? Sure, they're great if you have 100 pounds per bag, or these cloth ones in front if you have 300 pounds per bag. But I'm just fine with that. The big thing is try to make it look like that picture before you put it into any of those bags, and you're going to be so much happier. I don't know where we want to go with blending. What to blend, which kinds of wool blend good with which kinds of alpaca, how do we feel about mohair, what about synthetics, is there a role for silk? So that could be a whole nother talk unless somebody's raising their hands and saying, I'm dying to ask something about blending.
I am, but I don't know what the question is. I want to learn more about blending.
Me too.
How about blending with silk?
How about blending with silk? So here's the two approaches to blending. We'll go this deep into blending. One approach to blending is match what you got with what you're adding. So you have 20 pounds of Cormo, you have customers for 40 pounds of yarn. What are you going to do? They're your Cormo customers. They don't want you to blend that with anything but more Cormo. If you can't get Cormo, how about some Rambouillet, some Targhee, some Merino? Remember that chart of the fine, the medium, and the long? So there's one blend. Is take what you got and add something similar to it, both in terms of length, in terms of crimp, in terms of color. So there's one, just match and extend. Thing two, and there you are. Meg and I just talked about dark Mora and making it a little more marketable with adding a little white and making it medium Mora. The darker yarns don't always sell as well as things that you can see the stitches in better. And so there's a blend for color. To just add a little white to brighten something, add a little black to make maybe charcoal instead of medium gray. So all sorts of blends for color. In that case, same idea. Stick with your breed or a comparable breed. So she had Icelandic. If you don't have more Icelandic, well, it's fine to put in a Shetland or, something dual coat, so something comparable. So there's this whole one concept of blend to match. And the second one is blend to get a new attribute. So let's say you just want softness. And the Hudson Valley Textile Project, that I think you may all be following me and so on. One of the things we're really trying really hard is to find something affordable to buy, affordable to raise, affordable to process, that in the end we can make yards of yard goods or quick blankets, really affordable products. I had an example of an affordable product. It had been on a chair.
Turn left.
Here. Thank you. So this is something that we're making a Hudson Valley textile project that can be a table runner. It can be cut in 4 pieces and become tabletops. It can be just about anything or yard goods. So in this case, we're looking at what can be locally sourced and how can we soften it. This is particularly hard because we've done no washing to this piece yet. We used it last weekend as a table runner at a farm-to-table supper, and so we wanted to keep it stiff, but this will soften up because of the amount of the alpaca that's in it. So there's a blend to take local fiber that may not be particularly soft and try to soften it by adding some local alpaca. Again, you're trying to match fiber length and crimp to the extent possible. So if you're using a traditional wavy Romney with some average, medium, Corriedale or Dorset or something, soften that up with not royal baby or baby alpaca. Soften that up with some number 3s in the grading of not, there's 2 kinds of 1, 2, 3. I don't mean second cut or third cut. I mean grade 3 alpaca that's still a good micron, but a micron that's a little softer than the wool. So there's a use to soften wool. Vice versa, if you've got this spectacular alpaca, you know, that's won all these ribbons, it's 17 micron, don't necessarily go ahead and add some Cotswold to that, even though it is the same length. I don't think you should do that, because that's just going to take away from that. And this is a case where I would say, don't match the length, don't match the crimp, and get your beautiful alpaca. And if you do want to blend something really nice with it, some Cormo or some Merino, something that's really going to do it justice. And in that case, silk might be the answer. And Kathy had an example here of this gal's really fine alpaca that she blended some silk with. The challenge, Karen, of blending that silk, and any of you who are hand spinner who've tried to blend it just at the drop spindle, just at the spinning wheel, you know that silk comes in a long processed piece of roving, and you've got to really break it down and get it integrated into what you're spinning. I've tried carding it in, and I have mixed results. That means you're ripping up combed top to card it in, and sometimes that'll just go right in, and other times you have like shredded silk. So worrisome, and I try to pin draft in my silk. So we could go on and case studies and blend this with that, and maybe when we get to how many plies of yarn and how thick on different weights, some more examples of blends. I'm a big advocate of a blend, though, to get the attributes a customer's looking for. And probably our biggest success story in a blend is this line right here. It's a local Romney, 40 or 50% Romney, and the rest is U.S. sourced Merino. And we're making that for Quince & Co. We're making that for probably a dozen yarn stores in the Northeast. We make it for a ton of indie dyers. They usually get it from us like this and go from there. And we could pass those around if you'd like. And to me, I think we landed on a really good mix there of very local. Okay, yes. But first, Meg and then Susan.
Well, so this is a yarn product that's from your mill. It's not for a customer, or you said it's for a particular customer?
We make that for quite a few customers. Sometimes 40-60, sometimes 60-40.
But Romney razors, or
sometimes Romney razors.
Sometimes, or are you like sourcing all of the raw material? And I guess I'm a little confused about.
So sometimes a Romney farmer, like Foster Sheep Farm, says to me, I need this Romney to feel a little better. What can I do? And I said, well, we could try adding a little fine wool or medium wool and seeing if we could squish it up a little for you. And it's usually because they're looking for squish as well as drape. So a good medium, and that's why I think those two garments really showcase how a blend like that. So some of the customers could be a farmer or a Romney farmer who want to make it a little more marketable. Sometimes the customer is a yarn company like Quince & Co., who's looking to get into the local fiber, made in America, and they want something, well, frankly, where the raw material is cheap. And so that's a way you can steer them, and with very good messaging. And, yes?
What is the mix again?
I don't know. It's around 50-50. I think the white is 50-50 and the orange might be
What breed?
60-40. Romney and maybe Merino.
Very nice.
It's certainly a fine wool. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering which yarn it was from Quince & Co.
It's in their stone wool line.
Oh, okay.
So I don't actually know what they call it.
They're Osprey, they're Turner.
Yeah,
They
it's
have all
not
the
Osprey or
birds.
Turner one. It's got its own name in their stone wool line.
And there's no more. Okay, thanks.
And then quite a few local yarn stores want a yarn made just for them that they will dye or have us dye, and they ask me for recommendations, and so I always recommend that. And that looks good at any weight too. I mean, that blend will look fine even at an Aran, like a pretty heavy Aran, and that also will work up fine. We send it to weavers at 1,800 yards per pound, or even a sock yarn. So it's just a case of blend that works.
So Mary Jane, can you touch on, like, where do you source the other? Like, so you're saying, like, you can get some of the Romney from one of your local producers, but you're saying you also source from what's the other that you're adding into that?
So in that case, that's U.S. sourced merino that we buy from a collective of small fine wool farms where New Mexico and Colorado come together, like the Four Corners area. And we have that merino or fine wool, is a lot of it's rambouillet too, have that commercially scoured, because it's really hard to get volume like that clean in just the 7-sink method. It really needs a scouring line. And as you know from coming to the local Fibers Summit, the Hudson Valley Textile Project Summit, scouring is like this overarching issue if we're ever going to really go to full commercialization of all the wool that's being grown, all the fiber that's being raised in the Northeast. That right now, it used to not matter so much to send it all to South Carolina, but as the price of freight keeps going up, and as we become more concerned about our impact. I mean, even if freight was cheap, you don't want a whole lot of miles on this material. So the more that can be kept without involving tractor trailers, the better. But on the other hand, we can't beat this weather. The merinos, cormos, rambouillets, the fine wools that people are growing successfully for fleece in this area those fleeces are selling as individual fleeces or parts of fleeces to the hand spinners for $20 and $30 a pound in the grease. In the grease. So, excuse me?
I've seen pieces sold for $50 a pound.
$50 a pound.
Oh my God.
Yes. So, but that's the ones that have the 3 coats and sheep 2 and neat over the back of sheep 1, and they didn't have lamps. And, yeah, there was a lot of things that went into that. So, blending could be like, we could do a whole other night on blending, but it was an important topic. So I'm going to give you 7 choices of what you would do after shearing. And I urge you all to think strongly about choice number 1. There's a lot of fleece and fiber in the world, and your animal is going to make more again next year, or even in 6 or 8 months, they're going to make more. And so option 1, which is to toss it, is a very real option. I know you came to hear a very uplifting talk about how yarn is made and how we can all profit from yarn, but if we really are going to profit from yarn, we need to make sure that quality is part of what people think. When you say, oh, I am a maker in New York State, I'm an alpaca farmer in New York State, I'm involved in the fiber industry in New York State, you don't want the next reaction of that person to be an eye roll, a chuckle, or anything else. We're trying to raise the bar, and to do that really is going to require everyone taking a hard look at what they're keeping and what they're discarding. That said, if it breaks your heart to throw it over the bank, there are options to sell your fiber to pools. In the alpaca industry, I think they're more private businesses. I'm not really sure, but there's probably a dozen different one of these sort of for-profit groups that'll send emails around. We'll have a truck in your area and we're buying. If you're not sure on that quality, go to that truck and sell it. Do what you can with that. For wool farmers, there's the Finger Lakes wool pool, Southern Tier wool pool. We have a Southern Adirondack wool pool, and other places, states, if all those seem too far. Something to think about before it goes over the bank, but don't expect to make much more money. You aren't even going to pay for your gas to go to the pool. It's that kind of, but if you can't stand to put it over the bank, sell it at the pool. Sell the fleece to a commercial buyer. This is a shameless plug for anybody who has a fleece that they're not sure they want to invest in making yarn for themselves. I've got plenty of customers who don't have any sheep at all and will be happy to have what I can make with your rejects. So that's my number one message, especially to some of these spectacular wools, like Donna Abruzzi's Corriedales. So she wins the blue ribbon at New York State Fair, and what she considers her skirtings are just spectacular. So definitely don't sell to the pool if you have spectacular. And then option 4, which I think as a small farmer may be your single greatest way to make money. As much as I'd like you to send me wool and have me make you yarn, if you can get it cleaned up nice and you have an Etsy page, or you have a booth at a fiber festival, or you have a partnership with a store, if you have a market, just sell it. The more money you put into it, A, you could make more money, but B, you could also lose more money if you can't recoup it. So the sooner you can sell something, the sooner you get some money. But that said, let me keep going. I told you I had 7 options, and the next option is not all that hard. If you've got an outlet for it, have some yarn made. Nothing too expensive. You know, don't add your silk. Just something like that, or some kind of just. If you're going to do a blend, just a sock yarn blend. You know, don't make any kind of big investment in your blended product, and then go find somebody who wants to carry it. And you'll have to sell it on consignment or at some scale where you won't make a lot, but you also don't have to worry about selling it. And then you could be like Wing and a Prayer Farm. Do any of you follow Wing and a Prayer Farm? Yeah. Well, there's where I went all the way back to talking about people who are selling an experience. They're selling a brand. And when you buy Wing and a Prayer yarn, you're buying Tammy's life on her farm. Her wake up with her tour of the barn and meet the animals, and that cute little 9th grade girl who's working illegally, helping her out there. So you know what I mean. That's what you're buying. But if you can build a story like that, then that's going to help us all in the fiber industry, because it's reaching people who haven't really thought about sustainability or knowing their farmer or what is it like to try to raise animals. So you're helping us all. Yes?
Is there anyone besides Tammy who has done this? She's the only one I've seen it.
Well, I think that Paula from White Barn Farm has got quite a nice following, and
Where's her farm?
in New Paltz.
Oh, okay.
And Carol Foster has a lot of people.
Big social media presence.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's
it
what's
all has to do
incredible.
with social media or knit nights, events. Come to the farm and eat our baked goods and have an experience. But I think there's a lot more opportunities for that than are presently being undertaken. That finding ways of sharing your life, and I hope we're not telling stories, Karen, but years ago, how old is your baby now?
He's almost 8 now.
8. So
Almost 8.
Almost 8. So almost 8 years ago, I had a group of, I don't know, Kathy, do we have 20 girls here on that fiber tour? From all over the country. It doesn't matter how many, but they all came to Karen's farm. And she was the kind of pregnant that you could all feel. You know, her back was not going to go back into place till that baby came out. And the next day, it did. So she was entertaining 20 people in the barn with the sheep, pushing them around. So in these 8 years, those women have continued to travel with me. In fact, we're going to New Mexico together on September 30th. We have 2 seats left. We've had a cancellation, so don't be shy. Now, opportunity to go with 24 other amazing gals to New Mexico. Anyhow, 20 of them, for whatever number. We're at Karen's, and I'll bet you before the first day is over in New Mexico, someone will say, remember the farm we went to? And that nice girl and her husband, and she was so pregnant. They remember a story like that and connect it to the farmer, for sure. So sorry to drag you into this, but that's all part of marketing and branding. And then this is a whole nother arena, and more of my customers are making the leap into option number 7, which is having something made. Because it's a big investment, but if you make the right thing, you make a lot of money. And so this is probably the single biggest, best example of make the right thing and make a lot of money.
Really?
Yes, so Lily wove this from just kind of barnyard sheep. Medium wool, Corriedale, Oxford, Columbia. You know, on that chart, they weren't over on the fine end. We put this through the card a few times. We kettle dyed the stripes. You know, it's got an investment in it, but not an outrageous investment. But I'll tell you what, when people see this, they gotta have it. They want to buy it. Well, this is just a scrap. But the full size, the twin or the queen, they gotta have, and they decide they're buying it, and then they say, oh, how much is it? And then they still buy it when they find out what it is. So you can have that to sell, or you can have that to sell. I mean, that's an okay skein of white, 2-ply, medium wool yarn. I mean, if you had a lot of grandbabies who needed a lot of sweaters, this would be a go-to. You know, Christmas hats, a troop of Girl Scouts who are looking for a charity project. This is a great yarn for those purposes. And commercially, we've seen yarn like this forever. But look at what that transformation.
Well, what sort of like profit or cost, like for a blanket, and should it cost the same cost? I mean, is it?
So a twin of this can sell for $300 without any trouble, and a queen of this for $500. And if you compare that to Swan's Island, that's at least $100 less than what they're selling for. But they are Swan's Island, and we all are XYZ.
How many hours of work went into producing it?
How many hours?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea. We charge by the blanket.
Rather than like,
So a twin is $135 and a queen is $225. So
That's
Can you make
production costs.
yes.
You make these at your mill?
No, I have 4 cooperating weavers that I work with. So when Susan came to a knitter's retreat, she met one of our cooperating weavers named Lily, who made this. But I also work with Kelly and Peggy and Tegan. And then we also spin for another weaver named Rabbit, Thistle Hill Weavers. But my customers who go to Rabbit work directly with Rabbit. So we broker to 4 1- and 2-person studio weavers, and then people who have 20 or more commercial blankets go on their own to Thistle Hill.
This is exactly that. I saw Lily's blanket and said, oh, this is beautiful. And then $135 or whatever, but I have to have it.
Yeah.
I've never bought anything that expensively handmade,
so
but
she's weaving that on a
it's amazing.
It's an AVL. It runs on compressed air. I mean, a human being has to set up warp it, but then when she has the program, the compressed air goes back and forth. And, so then she can be doing another project on another loom at that same time.
Okay,
So,
it's semi-automated.
yeah, it's semi-automated. You gotta warp it yourself. This is a whole nother thing to consider. If you don't think you've got a lot of customers for the $130, for the $300 to $500, maybe you got some $90 customers. This has got less than a pound of wool in it. It's got a great story. I brought this to show you because there's about 4 different stories, and stories sell. So the gray in this is Gotland, and everyone's talking about Gotland. And somewhere here, look behind me, no, look on the floor. In case you haven't felt Gotland, there's a skein of Gotland. And the white is Wensleydale, and pink is hand-painted Wensleydale. So this has got quite a nice story, but is a price point that isn't going to be a choking hazard. So that can go around. By the way, that's Wensleydale woven. There's Wensleydale knit. Look at the drape and sheen in that. It's, boy, I hate to do this. For you girls, I'll do it. But look at how it lays. I mean, there's a yarn begging to be made into a shawl. You know, I'm not going to advocate that we make hat mittens from this, but boy, look at the drape. That's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. Okay, so we're talking about after shearing now what have finished goods made. So we've been doing quite a lot of experimenting with machine knitting. So this is a swatch made at the Stoll Knit Resource Center in New York City. And our customers will have us spin yarn for them, like this yarn. We spun, they call it a 2/8 in machine world. This is, wait till you pass this one around, you're not going to believe what you're feeling. This is Cotswold, blended with a little U.S. sourced merino. So sort of like that Romney merino idea, only taking it to the extreme of 2 fiber length and 2 fiber softnesses. But it worked. Our customer owns a farm out on Long Island. So she's got Margaret, and her husband, who's a cutie, had this beat-up old fisherman's sweater that was sort of his signature. And people came to their farm stands and saw him in this beat-up sweater, and he's like, I just picked this up. And, you know, he's wearing it with that casual frayed cuff look. And so people said, we want one of those sweaters. And so the farmer called me up and said, I need your help. I want to make a sweater. I said, well, where did he get that from? Oh, his mom brought it to him from Ireland. I said, okay. So that's a woolen mill. That's a different breed of sheep. You've got old school Cotswold. They got the kind of Cotswolds that are, you know, every inch there's one crimp. That kind of Cotswold. The kind they used to use strictly to stuff saddles with. But I don't have the heart to tell this girl that her Cotswold is saddle stuffing. You know, can-do attitude. My life savings still hanging in the balance. Let's work something out. And so I said, let's talk to Carol at the Knit Resource Center, who has since retired. And a new gal, Eileen, is fabulous, so no worries. Anyhow, let's talk to Carol and see, let's get a picture of Chris wearing the sweater and show this look and what can be done with machine knitting, with affordable machine knitting, because I don't want to make really thin yarn either. I want to keep moving. The 2/8 is about the size we like to make. So she came up with this. We spin hundreds of pounds of it. They'll knit up to 300 garments in any one size. So even though it's a knit resource center, they exist to do pattern development and help you get ready to commercialize. They'll also make that many. Up to 300 is still considered a sample run. Because if you were going to sell that at Macy's now, you would need 300 because it's going to have to go to models, it's going to have to go to distributors and brokers and da-da-da. But in this case, 300 is plenty to satisfy the people that that come to their farm every fall and want a piece of him to take home. So there's something to consider, is in making an investment like that in a finished product. All right, so let's see where we're at. I don't know what that slide has to do with anything. It looked way too further in. Yes, ma'am.
Quick question, you
Yeah.
said the husband was Chris. Is she Tabitha?
No, but Tabitha's their shearer.
Yes.
Her name's Holly, and Tabitha's their shearer.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so, overview of fiber processing. I knew we wanted to just have a quick understanding. If we don't, does anyone else want to give the talk right now, or do you want me to keep going about the steps? You're okay with the steps? Keep going. Okay. I think you figured out by now, sorting, opening, washing, scouring are all the first few steps. At Battenkill Fibers, we air dry. That's not to say every mill air dries. We just have good luck with air dry, and that's one less machine to break down. And also, that's one less thing to worry about hurting the wool that you're processing for people. It's pretty easy at commercial scouring, where they also dry as part of that train, to lose the moisture and turn a perfectly lovely, a perfectly lovely wool into something like Brillo. So then we're ready to pick and card. And yes, yeah.
What kind of solution or soapy thing do you use to scour wool?
We buy a commercial preparation that emulsifies the lanolin. It's not harsh, but it's effective.
Does it have like lye and stuff in it?
Oh, I hate to ask. It's
Okay.
got, those triangles on it
Oh,
that
okay, yeah.
warn you, and it comes with material safety data
Oh,
sheets.
okay,
And
yeah,
You're
yeah.
not supposed to pour it without your glasses
Okay,
on.
thanks, that's close enough.
But you
Thanks.
only use a half a cup to 10 gallons.
Yeah,
So I'm not overly worried. And
Sure.
it also has no environmental hazard though. So we can put our water into a settling basin and get all the yuck out, and then put the gray water into the leach field, and then just the yuck we pump out and send to a municipal sewer. So scouring is essential. You can't take any of the next steps until your yarn is really clean. I mean, we can all, well, I can't, because as Kathy knows, I'm a horrible spinner on a spindle. But you can spin a little in the grease, but not at a commercial scale. It's just not going to work. So I want you to take a good look at this picture here. And then the next slide is going to talk about woolen or worsted and why does it matter. So now we'll go back to that picture. And, oh, there's that slide I don't understand.
yeah.
So right here is where a woolen or worsted decision gets made. So did any of you, some of you went to Finger Lakes Woolen Mill over the years and saw when they were carding, they went right to the spinner after they carded. They took the wool that came off the carder, right here, and instead of condensing it, cut it into pencil roving and rolled that onto a giant roller, and then the roller unwound over the spinner, and they spun from that pencil roving. Any of you who've ever been tempted to knit with pencil roving know it doesn't hold together. There's nothing to it because it's straight. There's no twist added to it. So woolen spun is that method in which you go from the card to the pencil roving. Worsted spun, which we do at Battenkill Fibers, involves never cutting the fiber. It's always combing, condensing, aligning to get to sliver thin enough to spin. And there's not a right answer. I obviously thought there was more of a market for worsted spun than for woolen spun. And I'm glad I did because of the breeds of sheep that we have a lot of in the area. They long wools, Romneys, Lincolns, Border Leicester, Leicester long wools, blue-faced Leicesters. There's quite a few of these long Cotswold, long staples that, and coarse, remember their other name is coarse wool, not just long wool. And so you can imagine in the course of a 6-inch piece, if you were starting to cut that, you might cut a 6-inch piece a half a dozen times. So now you have a couple of issues. You've got this 1 crimp per inch stuff that's been cut 6 times. So now you don't have a single crimp in some of those pieces. So there's nothing to hold it into the yarn other than twisting it really, really tight. So hopefully it'll grab. And if you can get it to go through, then you've still got all these ends sticking out. So long wool slippery fibers are really hard to make in woolen process. And so I'm really pleased with this approach. Unfortunately, this adds money to the farmer or the maker's cost. Because if it's woolen process, you cut it into pencil rope and you spin it. If it's worsted, you have to have a machine to gather it and coil it for the next process. Then you have to have a pin drafter to get it small enough to look like that so you're ready to spin it. And in our case, we discovered that 1 pin drafter wasn't even enough. So now we have the payments on 2 pin drafters and the payroll on 4 guys because we run 2 shifts a day on 2 pin drafters. So we've added some expense to making yarn, but boy, is it nice. Did everyone feel that Gotland?
Yeah.
Gotland can be kind of, scratchy at best. And it's really, really nice. And this is a couple of experiments we're doing with hemp and wool, and linen and wool. And we've been buying the bast fibers in. We're not decorticating them and doing all that. We're buying it as comb top. But boy, it's really nice for a project like that to be able to comb that in. And then this is how hemp looks when it's not combed in. This is Rowan hemp tweed. It's also the same, everything about it is the same ratio, the same everything. But you can just see these little chunks of hemp are just thrown in the cart as it's going by. And I'm sure you can say it's 75%, 25% hemp, but it's not nearly the smoothness of this, which is the same or more hemp. So you could pass that around for a comparison of woolen and worsted. Okay, so from here, I think you know what happens next. We're going to spin. And I have my opinions about how your fiber should be spun, and you may have your opinions, and sometimes it's a negotiation. In general, the longer the staple, the less twist you need to put in it to hold it together. But depending what you're going to do with it, you still may need to put quite a lot of twist into it. So like this, which we knew was going to be machine knit and has some merino in it, it's pretty tightly twisted as the singles. Not so tightly plied, but those singles are pretty firm. So a lot depends what you're intending to do with it. This is like this balancing act yarn here that's a real winner, and I'm heartbroken that our customers have closed. We made this for Classic Elite, and they closed kind of suddenly, and we have a special on a lot, but only this color. So we used to make it for them in all of these colors plus some browns, and we were this far on our next order. So now you're all here to help us, though. And there's lots more where this came from. This was in your pile. But anyhow, this is a good example of a balancing act of spinning the right twist and the right weight. This is Romney, merino, and a little nylon because Classic Elite wanted this as a sock yarn. So there's only a little nylon because you wouldn't want much more nylon in that if you weren't using it for socks. But this much holds its shape but still blocks. It's kind of a fine line between holds its shape and still blocks. And the same with the amount of twist, because now we're putting in 3-inch nylon and 3-inch merino, and the Romney in some cases isn't much longer, so we got to twist it pretty tight to get it to hold together. But on the other hand, we don't want it to turn hard. So it's this balancing act on how tightly you spin it, how loosely you can get away with plying it, and what you're going to use it for in the end. Okay, and so I don't know what else to tell you about that other than twist matters and plying follows twist. I mean, all of you who are hand spinners, I learned all this at the knees of Kathy Hall. The same principle, though. Everything that Kathy Hall ever taught any of us in this room about spinning applies to everything we do at a commercial mill. You don't ever want to ply something tighter than you spun it. Just rule of thumb number one. So as planning ahead for your project, you need to be thinking about what you're going to be making, because if you want some nice squishy hand knitting yarn like this, 3-ply, I mean, you don't want to be plying this more than 2 twists per inch or 2.5 twists per inch at the most, or otherwise you're not going to have squish anymore. You're going to have 3-ply baling twine made out of pretty nice wool. So you really have to watch what you're doing at plying. And let me just point out to you, this is a very interesting case. So was that a coincidence, or did I actually press my because I felt my hand, I think I'm far enough away. Okay, I have a red card, but it's not right there. Because right as that went, I put my hand on mine. Okay, so we could have, this is a 3-ply, and it could have been disastrous if we hadn't been very careful. But now what's nice about how it turned out is the versatility. This is it on a 7. It's still not too hard. We'll pass it around.
Yeah.
That's a 7. That's quite a yarn to put on a 7. This is it on an 8 or a 9. Maybe what people might call its right gauge. And this is it on a 10.5.
So is that a worsted yarn? I can't.
We'll pass it around. It's a 3-ply Aran.
Okay.
Maybe, I mean, the whole gauge thing is
Yeah.
so. But I treat it as an Aran. Okay, their hands are knitting here. You can start with that. So plying, you can still change what yarn you're making at the plying, but again, knowing what you're going to make. But keeping it loose like that for hand knitting really adds a lot to your versatility. Because if you had made that ply any tighter, you couldn't have made that 6-color Afghan thing at all. That's what I'm knitting my carbeth in too, that wool there. Knit my carbeth. I found some buttons I need, Julie, before I leave. They just jumped out at me. Somebody asked me, cones or skeins, and why does it matter? It all depends what you're going to do next. The easiest thing is to have a mill just put it up in 100-gram skeins for you, and you can tell them, tie it loose, I want to dye it myself, or the mill's going to dye it for you, or tie it firm because I don't want it getting away from me at fiber festivals where little kids are going to handle it. You may order it on cones because you're not quite sure what you're going to do with it, and you might want to skein it yourself. I mean, there's all different reasons and sizes on the cones. Some machine knitting knit with like 8 ends. They'll hook up 8 different cones and do things off of each one all the time. Some weavers say, I've got to wind up my shuttles anyhow, and just send it to me on the biggest cone you've got, and I'll wind from there. I don't need a bunch of little cardboard cones kicking around. So the size you order really has to do with what you want to make with it. Does anyone want to talk about 4 ounce versus 100 gram? For what my opinion's worth, go to 100 gram, because people who aren't sitting around in rooms like this, who are now in front of their air conditioning just looking at their Ravelry, who aren't digging into where does their yarn come from, people who just want to go buy it, they are buying by the skein.
So you can sell them less for the same amount.
Sell them 3.5 to 4 ounces for the price of 4 ounces, and they are buying it by the skein. More and more patterns are also written for 100-gram skeins, and so if you're putting it up in 4-ounce skeins, you're losing money right and left.
But I remember when they switched, because I'm older than most people here, and it was really scary because you'd be used to buying a certain number of 4-ounce games, and I didn't even notice that they went to metric. It was kind of a slippery thing, and then all of a sudden you're halfway through a sweater and you realize,
Yeah.
so it's that one half ounce.
Yeah, a half ounce on 8 skeins is a whole other
I mean,
skein.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tricky.
So you're right, but my recommendation, 100 gram, unless it's silk blend or a rare breed, or you're on an island in Maine where the ferry only lets each passenger take home 40 pounds of stuff, in which case you really ought to look at 50 gram or 2 ounce skeins. So there's a whole nother part to consider, is making a really small skein.
You know, small processing where you're selling from a farm store or whatever. I find a lot of people will ask me, how many do I need to do this? And I'm supposed to know that.
Which I don't.
But I do it by yard, but then depending on the weight, it's different, you know?
Right.
So it's not an easy question to answer, and I am always at sort of, do you have any suggestions?
Interweave makes a card, and I was just looking at Julie because a lot of times a yarn store has that card made by Interweave that tells you the answer to how much yarn do I need. Yeah, Knitter's Guide to, yeah.
So if it's like a DK weight and you want to make this size thing, they'll tell you like how many
Right.
yards.
So you read down to yarn weight and read across to size, and then where they meet on that chart tells you how many yards for a typical sweater or a typical hat. And it's all in what gauge do you want with the yarn. So do you want it 5 stitches to the inch, or do you want it 4 stitches to the inch? So it's not just the weight of yarn as much as it is the gauge you want to get with that weight of yarn.
Can I ask a question? Does it depend on if it's just wool or if you're blending it with something else? Does the thickness and the weight ratio change? I mean, I don't understand.
That's a very good question, and you actually have seen the answer unfold in your hands because of the micron count of the fiber that went into it. As you get into these so-called coarse wools or long wools, your micron count's going way up, which that slide we skipped over was showing you typical micron counts, like 35 and 40 microns. And so that is super dense. When you make that yarn, it looks like fingering, but it weighs like it was, it's very tricky. And that's a challenge that we've had a lot in working for farmers. Is sometimes the easiest thing to ask them is, how many yards do you want in your skein when it's done? And then just spin it to meet what they expect for yardage. Because, believe it or not, I'm guessing, look at all of that. I mean, doesn't that look like a huge skein? There's probably not even half as much yardage in that as there is in this. Because it's so foofy and so light, and this has got that dense nylon in it and that dense Romney in it. And if you go denser still, this Gotland here is very heavy and very dense. I bet if you took the weight on this, this would be like an Aran by just yards per skein. But if you look at it, you're going to knit it like a DK because of how it's wraps per inch. So it's a big topic to do. The best way to learn about what we're talking about here is a lot of breed study swatching. Make it your mission at the next fiber festival you go to buy one skein of 4 different breeds and keep track of which breed is which, and then knit 4 identical swatches, and then begin exploring what did you see as you were doing that. How much does each swatch weigh? How did it look when it was washed? Really dig into some of those breeds. There's a lot lot to be learned about how those breeds perform. So I think we've come just about to the end of our time together. A couple of more thoughts, and that is color or no color. Color really sells. It's just amazing how color sells, and try as we may to get people thinking about natural fibers. The color just really sells. Now, one thing that this group I'm involved with, the Hudson Valley Textile Project, we're trying to go for best of both worlds. And that is almost all of this is natural, except for the little blue stripe and the little green stripe. So try to get people thinking about mainly naturals with a pop of color. And having samples of things woven, knitted, whatever, in mainly naturals with a pop of color really helps it to sell. Mainly natural with a pop of color. This is all natural. Sometimes getting a bunch of all naturals and showing them what you can do with all naturals. Or my gray Gotland Wensleydale example, that really popped with just a little tiny bit of dyed yarn in it. So again, this is, if we really want to talk about sustainability, it's a very tricky conversation, a whole nother night on dyeing sustainability. So people say all the time, oh, well, is that plant dye? And I say, oh, you wouldn't catch me doing commercial plant dye. Oh, no, what do you mean? Think about, all of you who've experimented with plants know it's roughly gram for gram. So you need 100 grams dried flower petals to 100 grams skein. So one skein needs 100 grams of dried flower petals, which comes from a flower bed, a square foot. So if it takes 1 square foot for 1 skein of yarn, 10 skein, you see where I'm going with the math. There's going to be hungry people when farmers plow under their food crops to plant dye flowers. Furthermore, half the dye flowers that make the colors that are reproducible and vibrant that people really want when you talk about all the mordanting heavy metal chemicals, really need a plant that isn't native. So now we've plowed up food and we've planted plants that the pollinators who live around here are like, ew, what's that? I've never tried that. I don't want that. So now we have a pollinator problem with the stuff we're growing in the field where we used to grow things that should grow here. And then, on top of that, because it's this monoculture, unfortunately, then you start having to add a lot of herbicides and pesticides. And then we get to harvest, and anybody who's had a dye garden knows every day you go pick a few flowers. You don't just wait at the end of the season and cut the crop. Every day you pick a few flowers. So we can't find enough people to pick our grape crop in the Finger Lakes or our berry crop, our apple crop in the Hudson Valley. Even with guest worker programs, we still can't find enough people to pick a crop. So where exactly are we going to get commercial flower pickers who will walk by hand picking these flowers every day? So I recommend, instead of plant dyeing, judicious use of commercially prepared dyes instead. So not necessarily every skein in your offering. Do what you can with blending. So if you only have white alpacas, well, let's get a nice gray cormo fleece and blend it in. If you only have fawn alpacas, let's lighten that down with some white Corriedale and make it so it's oatmeal. Do some things like that to give yourself a range of colors without having to dye. And then maybe you can plant dye just a little. So for Hudson Valley Textile Project, we made these really super special kits here. This has turned out to a great fundraiser also. And you guys might think of having something to sell like this. We got the pattern donated by a local Hudson Valley pattern designer. And then these are plant dyed. And we talk a lot about who raised the plants and how were they dyed at the Fiber Craft Studio. So it can definitely be done, but in small scale. So color cells do it in small scale. There's a couple of ways to add color. Dyed in the wool. You've heard that, dyed in the wool. Oh, she's dyed in the wool. Well, that means through and through. When you dye in the wool, see it's all those different colors, but when it's carded, it gets it all homogeneous. Versus skein dyed, like the orange shawl, that was an oatmeal Romney Merino that we kettle dyed in some orange, and that was the result. That's a good way, economical. If you want 25 skeins of each 6 colors, have your mill, have us spin 250 skeins for you, and then dye 25, 25, 25, 25. It'll all go together. You can do stranded color work because all the yarn will be the same weight. That's a good way to get small runs. If you've got a couple of colors that you know are going to sell and that people want, like this, and you want it, because now this is being sold by color, 300 of these, then you want dyed in the wool. Then you want this sweater 2 to look like sweater 3 and sweater 300. So dyed in the wool is what you need for that scale. And this, my friends, brings us to our infamous last slide, in which I was hoping we could kind of spin off into a whole talk of certification, branding, messaging, networking, and put in a plug for if you're a maker, finding a farmer you can team up with. If you're a farmer, getting to know a maker who can design things for you, who could weave for you, who could, sky's the limit. And also, we've started the Hudson Valley Textile Project, really pushing this branding on all of our partners. All are now using a consistent hang tag. So this is still branded, so I'm part of a little startup called Hudson Farm Cloth that's working on yardage, and then we're also co-branding it with the Hudson Valley Textile Project, just again to help raise awareness of fiber and where it comes from and sustainable fashion. And here's a little line of placemats. Again, trying to use just pops of color. This is, believe it or not, mainly, there's a lot of gray and white in here, and it's just the warp has been done in the colors. So, I could just keep going, as you may have noticed, but it's a hot night to just keep going. And we've reached the almost 1 hour mark, so I feel like we should take a few group questions and then mingle around and talk more.
And I mean, I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like there's definitely more opportunity for when you're in town again, right? To maybe touch on some of these other subjects. But yeah. Questions? Did we cover it, or did MJ cover it all?
Yeah.